All in all, it's a really challenging year.
The coronavirus pandemic upending all of our lives.
We are seeing an uptick in anxiety and depressive symptoms in students,
leading to another emerging health crisis.
Some of these kids are kind of the forgotten group in COVID right now.
In children's lives, this has in many ways been a lost year. And I think that the effects are going to be seen for a long time to come.
The mental health impact on children and the urgent warning from a local pediatrician.
So I've never seen this many children have so many psychological issues before, and I've never seen so many children need inpatient admissions before. So it's very troubling.
The number of kids suffering is staggering.
My first instinct is, what can I do? I have to do something.
Tonight, we investigate the pandemic's silent impact on children, why it could affect them for years to come.
The residual effects of all of this accumulated stress, it's going to need our attention.
Unfortunately, I think it actually will have a long-lasting impact on children.
And good evening, everyone. Nearly a year into the coronavirus crisis, the pandemic is taking a tremendous toll on the mental health of children and parents. Tonight, we focus not just on the impact, but what's ahead. Megan Coleman is with us this evening to reveal her weeks of investigating this rolling crisis.
And it certainly is a crisis, Michael. Indeed, it's been almost a year since students across central New York have been in school 5 days a week. Life as they knew it was abruptly altered last March when schools shut down as the pandemic took hold in our region. Lately, there's been a lot of discussion about changing the guidelines for social distancing, social distance learning from 6 feet of separation to just 3 feet, allowing more students to learn in person. It's something local health departments are deciding whether to allow, and local districts are deciding if and how it will be implemented. Since the spring, many students have been attending class fully remote from home or in a hybrid learning model, with families turning bedrooms, living rooms, and kitchens into classrooms. Many students are having trouble completing assignments, staying focused, and struggling without social interaction. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll dive deep into the devastating effect this is having on our children.
We are going right to the heart of this issue, from those in school buildings and those who are remote, and doctors who see children in crisis in emergency rooms.
We begin tonight with a team of experts seeing the fallout firsthand, including an elementary school principal, child psychologist, and several school psychologists who both praised students and parents for their resiliency, but also gave us a window into the challenges many families are facing.
It has been 10 long months since 12-year-old Maggie and 9-year-old Betsy Vincent have been in school full-time inside their classroom. Since last March, the Manlia sisters have sat in front of their screens at home at least 3 days a week.
We started off strong because I had energy for that.
With no end in sight, their mother Dana set the girls up in their dining room, complete with laptops, headphones, books, and every school supply they would need.
When it was that we're not getting back, and I got 6 weeks into it, and we were exhausted, and it stopped being fun for them. So they were reflecting a lot of crying and screaming at me.
And they are not alone. Across central New York, children are struggling.
We are seeing an uptick in anxiety and depressive symptoms in students.
Last month, licensed psychologist Michelle Story took part in a virtual event put on by the New York Association of School Psychologists with a team of experts discussing how best to support students and families with distance learning.
None of us knew how to deal with this situation. We've never dealt with it before.
Our systems are just not set up to be able to, tolerate this level of stress for this long without some real intentional intervention.
Liverpool school psychologist Leah Stuck has 2 young children of her own doing hybrid learning. She feels the stress too.
There are days that we feel like we are just nailing it and, we could do this for so much longer. And there are other days that are incredibly hard.
And it's not just the kids dealing with mental health concerns. Experts are also seeing an uptick in anxiety and depression among parents struggling to keep up with a job and support their children.
It is impacting parents just as much as it's impacting kids, and in some cases even more so.
Really come together.
Kara May, principal at Burton Street Elementary School in Cazenovia, is a former school psychologist who says schools need to be supportive, helping students and families get through this.
We have to be flexible with deadlines and flexible with expectations and meet the family and the student where they're at that moment in time.
Did you make your list?
Nearly a year into this, the Vincent sisters are in a better routine, spending 3 days a week at their home workstations with no end to hybrid learning in sight. They're trying to stay positive, realizing it's a moment in time they'll never forget.
At this point, I'm like, this is crazy town. Like, I can't even believe this. I'm like, you will be telling your grandchildren about this.
Well, if your child is struggling, experts say it's okay to walk away from the assignment and reach out to your child's teacher for help.
They want parents to know that you aren't alone in this and that school districts do have resources that may be able to help. Across the country, emergency rooms have seen a 24% increase in mental health related visits among children ages 5 to 11. That's heartbreaking to say. The increase among older children is even higher. It's 31%. At Upstate Golisano Children's Hospital, the patients doctors saw in the last year had more severe symptoms of mental illness, with 300 children admitted to the hospital last year for attempting to take their own lives. St. Joseph's Health in Syracuse reports a 4.3% increase in children coming into the emergency room in the last year. St. Joe's saw a 5% spike in children requiring outpatient care.
One local pediatrician highlighting the crisis in a letter to parents earlier this month.
Dr. Robert Draker of Summerwood Pediatrics wrote from the heart, and it's like nothing in his career.
His letter being shared more than 650 times on Facebook, saying he has never witnessed so many children suffering from anxiety and depression, with some cutting themselves and even trying to take their own lives. The longtime pediatrician says he has seen 5 to 10 children admitted to the hospital each week.
It is absolutely horrible. 50% of my schedule every day is dealing with mental health issues of some sort. I've never spent more time with kids who are having psychological issues. I've never prescribed more medication at times that I'm not always comfortable doing, but I have to do something to help the kids.
Kimberly Monahan of North Syracuse says this has had a big impact on her 2 children who have seen a significant drop in their grades and are failing some classes. Monahan says her son recently came to her with a startling confession.
A few months ago came to me and admitted that he was having some very extreme difficulties. Couldn't find his happiness anymore. It was a very sobering experience. It's rampant. And it's unfortunate, it's scary, and it's sad. And it's COVID's fault.
The problem is so bad in Las Vegas, it forced a sudden change. A surge in student suicides, pushing the Clark County school system to resume 5-day-a-week in-person learning. 18 children took their own lives during the 9 months of school closures, double the number from the entire previous year. One young student left a note saying he had nothing to look forward to. From the classroom to the emergency room, doctors in central New York are reporting a spike in the number and the severity of mental health cases in children.
One doctor I spoke with says kids were able to put on a brave face for the first few months of the pandemic, but now we are starting to see the true effects on them. Here is what they are seeing: stress and anxiety, depression, eating disorders, suicidal thoughts and attempts. Doctors say more children are being admitted to the hospital and seeking outpatient services like psychotherapy. All of it causing alarm in the medical community, with one doctor telling me he has never seen anything like this so severe.
Haven't seen anything this widespread or this deep. And a lot of children have tried to be so resilient.
Okay, I need a breath after all of that because it is truly staggering, and I hope that someone watching has learned something so far about the extent of it. We know that it's unprecedented, but I'm wondering, what is it about the COVID crisis that doctors are blaming specifically?
Right, so all 3 doctors that I spoke with say that not being in school 5 days a week has taken a big toll on children. And without the consistency of school and, of course, those really important social interactions, children are struggling.
Is this something that you can directly attribute to the pandemic? Is that what you're hearing from the kids?
Absolutely. You know, often the stresses are to do with online schooling. So kids falling behind, not being able to get the help, or kids not having access to their usual friends, not having access to extracurricular activities.
Perhaps even more startling are the ages of the children that are being impacted. Most commonly, the doctors tell us they're seeing children ages 10 to 17, but some are as young as 4.
Think about that. Those are preschoolers. And what is so heartbreaking, one expert I spoke with says many of the children they're seeing were happy and well-adjusted kids prior to the pandemic. Children they're now seeing in crisis.
And the interesting thing that we've noticed over the last year is that we're meeting kids that we don't think we probably would have met if it wasn't for these conditions. We think these are kids that had sports, had friends, had extracurricular activities, and those were sort of helping them cope and deal. And without those activities, we're seeing them in a hospital when we might not have seen them otherwise.
Heartbreaking. The experts all agree it is critically important to find a safe way to get children back in school.
But so far, there really isn't a great timetable for that. So how can we support the children right now?
Right. That is the most important question. Doctors say the best thing you can do is open your ears and listen to them. Validate how they're feeling. Let them know they're not alone. And give them an outlet to tell you how all of this is impacting them.
Coming up on this special edition of NBC3 News at 7, what comes next?
When more students are in school more often, what are the challenges families will face that we are not thinking about right now? What do we need to anticipate now? We have documented the struggle, and now we look ahead.
When more students are in school buildings more often, what challenges should we be thinking about now to be more prepared then? Dr. Tanya Pelletieri is a clinical psychologist, and she's with us now. Doctor, thanks for being with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
What aren't we thinking about right now? 2 months down the road, 6 months down the road, 8 months down the road, when more children are in more classrooms, in more buildings, what aren't we anticipating?
So I think there's a couple of things we need to be prepared for. One of them is what I'm already seeing behind the scenes. Over time, some schools have opened, gone from fully virtual to hybrid program, and along this school year, parents have decided to send their kids back to school for the 2-day hybrid option, whereas they might have started their children on a 100% virtual schedule. So I'm starting to see the anxiety creep up because we've kept our kids virtual and at home and quarantined for so long. Especially in the kids that already have that pre-existing anxiety, it's spiking because now we're saying after months of mask up, social distance, COVID is dangerous and it can really harm our family. Now we're saying go back into the classroom. I saw a spike in August when schools reopened after being completely shut down for the spring. And I'm seeing now mid-year as some families are opting to send their kids back into the classroom that anxiety is peaking. So I can only imagine that when we say to kids in the fall, now we're going back 5 days, should that be the case, that we're going to again see an uptick in anxiety. So it's that those depressive and anxious symptoms that I worry about increasing. The other end of the spectrum, so to speak, is kids now have been home a lot, being left to their own devices, in many cases creating their own schedules, some successfully and some not, but sleep schedules have been off. Kids are now choosing when they do certain assignments, and the rules at home are just different than the rules at school. So we're gonna have a little bit of a transition issue here with kids going back into the building 5 days a week and now having to follow a set of rules that they have not had to 5 days a week for a year and a half by the time this happens in September, if it does. So I think there's a couple of things that we're not necessarily thinking ahead about.
Sure. Will it be sort of a light switch that will go off that these kids who have this increased anxiety and depression, all of a sudden they're going to do a 360 once they're able to interact with their friends again and be like the normal kids that we had pre-pandemic?
Well, I think for some kids, yes. I think the kids that are, connected socially, I think the kids that do well at school, I think that the resilience that we see in children in general will just kick in. I think a lot of kids will easily kind of float back into a normal situation. You have to remember that the kids that I work with typically don't fall inside the box. These are the round pegs and the square holes. And so they're the ones that I worry about with this transition, and absolutely not. We will not be looking at a light switch. It is not going to be a 180. It is going to be a really rough reentry for some of the kids, especially the kids that I've had the fortune of working with my career.
What can we do to supplement? I mean, so many school districts are talking about social, emotional well-being and that being a focus. I've talked to teachers who are now getting back into buildings a little bit, and they say, we needed an hour just to talk amongst ourselves. How are you doing? Let me tell you my pandemic story. What would you advise districts and individual classroom teachers be doing to prepare for when they're all back in the room and need to kind of get some of this out?
Yeah, I think, we said this back in August too, that, let's make sure that families get as much information as possible as to what school's going to look like in September this past year. And I think that's going to be equally as important. Like, what is it going to look like? We're back all 5 days, but is it still going to be masks and social distance? And so the more information you give families, the more information families can trickle down to their children, the less the anxiety will be an issue. But I love that so many schools this whole academic year have set aside that time to make sure they're talking to their children. They've created those social emotional moments and opportunities when the kids are in school, to connect and to share with each other that we're not alone in this, that we're all kind of in the same storm, maybe different boats, but all in the same storm. And I really hope that schools continue. I worry that schools, in an effort, in a panic to catch the kids up academically, to overcome all the losses and try to regain all of that too quickly, that we're going to lose opportunities to again connect with kids on a social emotional level and make sure that they're okay. So I really do hope that that continues.
Yeah, and how important is that going to be for us as a society to invest in mental health? We've talked about it for so many years in light of school shootings and other incidents, that we need to really put a focus on that. In light of the pandemic, how important will it be for school districts to come through with that?
Well, I hope that just because it leaves the news, it doesn't leave our conversations. I think just like any other traumatic experience or, and any other, issue that we've ever talked about, we need to continue the dialogue, and we need to help us be prepared for potentially the next time we find ourselves in conflict and chaos. So it's dialogue, it's talking, it's doing these stories. It's thinking ahead. It's planning. And I think that's really going to save us all.
Dr. Tanya Pelletieri, thanks for being with us. Appreciate your insight.
Coming up on NBC3 News at 7, if you suspect your child is struggling, what are the key warning signs to watch for?
And what's out there if a child you love needs help? After this newscast ends, the discussion will continue.
We take your questions directly to Dr. Rapke from Upstate Golisano Children's Hospital. That's at 7:30 on our CNY Central Facebook page. If you notice your child withdrawing, showing rage, having mood swings, or sleeping too much, get help right away.
Or if they're telling you, as some have, that they feel hopeless, that they feel trapped, or if they're talking about wanting to take their own life.
If you or someone you know needs mental health resources, 211 of Central New York has a database to help. Click mental health, then check psychiatry medication. Type in your zip code and a list of services near you will pop up.
The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline provides free confidential support around the clock. It's 1-800-273-TALK. You can get help dialing that number.
Thank you so much for joining us for this special broadcast about a topic that is impacting so many families and will likely continue for months and possibly years to come. I'm Megan Coleman.
I'm Michael Benny. Megan, your reporting on this has opened eyes for sure. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. We can't talk enough about it. Good night.